the positivity rate going up
Mm-hmm.
and watching BA2.
Which is why I'm asking the questions. I'm just seeing where the
Those of
comfort level
us,
is.
some of us are being a little more self-protective than others.
I just had a daughter who got over
Read
it.
between the lines on that one.
That's what I-
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're gonna start jumping into the large alcohol bill. My understanding is there's perhaps other issues besides what's in the bill that the House couldn't quite get to, but wouldn't mind us looking at. So we'll hear about those as well. But this is our first walkthrough. We have a good hour and a half or so to devote to this morning. Thank you. So Representative Brown, if you want to start.
Thank you, committee. For the record, Representative Matt Byron for GENS, represented by communities in Northwest Addison County. And here to discuss.
I'm sorry.
This year's omnibus booze bill.
It's what the senators say, yes. So, there is, within this bill right now, you're taking a look at one, pretty substantial policy change with the department, and that would be the inclusion of, or the allowing of, fortified wines and, spirit-based low alcohol beverage cocktails in a can to be sold in Class 2 licensed stores, so outside of the 802 Spirit Network. The other pieces that are in there, we're taking a look at removing the second deputy commissioner from just as a job title statute. We are also looking at opening up the access to a broader realm of allowing the department access to, was it ECIC, which is a search engine for background checks, licensure applicants. Also within the license conversation, doing staggered licenses, which we started doing during COVID, and that is something that's deemed a far easier workload for the department, so they don't get sort of an all at once flood of application renewals. And I'm pulling the bill up right now, and I'm forgetting the fourth piece.
A Tucker one.
Mr. Anderson throwing about
Rare products, Raffles.
rare product raffles, yes. So currently, the rare product raffles, it was interpreted that they are only, thank you so much, sir, accessible to the public, and this would allow third-class license holders to put in for those raffles so they can have a product that's, obviously desired, sort of a conversation piece, to be able to showcase at their hospitality establishments.
I thought they already started to do that.
It's available to the public. The statute is vague on whether or not a third-class license can participate.
So go back to the, if you may, if I'm not interrupted.
No.
Go back to the first piece. Sounds like the one significant policy in this bill.
Correct.
Can you just talk about that a little bit? Where generally can we find that? What section?
Sure, certainly. So at the moment, you're seeing, over the last couple of years, there's been a major shift in product and consumption. You're taking a look at like hard seltzers, and people are doing more canned products. So currently, a hard seltzer that is malt-based, something like a Truly or like a White Claw or two very popular brands, because it is malt-based, is available in second-class licenses, so grocery stores, corner stores, etc. Now, a comparable product that is spirits-based with comparable ABV, but simply because it's made with a spirit, like a gin and tonic in a can, can only be sold in an 802 outlet. And the only reason that that is the case is because of the method with which the alcohol is synthesized.
Is what?
Synthesized, how it's created.
But the alcohol content is similar.
Absolutely.
So we tax all distilled spirits by its distillation, by how it's made. And the others are all taxed by the beer and wine are taxed together.
No, they're separate within their own designation. So
Right,
they have
but
the
they're-
three,
but-
so they have their own different
But the
taxes.
difference between taxation is how it's made.
Correct. Yes, yes. They're all looked at, like you have the three buckets, the malt, vinous, and spirits.
Right, but and they're all taxed.
Are we
by-
talking about taxation or a location where you can sell it?
Right now, we're talking about like outlet with which it's sold, but there is a taxation component
There's
within it.
Big money piece to this.
Yes.
There's alcohol content, any driver
On the, no,
on taxation.
No, that's a puzzling in.
correct. Yes, I agree with you on that. Yes.
So what section of the bill, just so I can glance at that?
We are at section 2 definitions, because what we did here is,
Section 2 starts right away.
yes. So ready, yes, right for a page.
So-
Yes,
So that we call these things, there are a lot of names for these things. Low alcohol, ready to drink,
we landed on ready to drink spirit beverages.
and canned cocktails. They're all the same thing.
Correct.
So that's like, an example of that may be a Seagram's gin and tonic.
Correct.
What is an example of the ones that are sold in the grocery stores that have similar alcohol content? I don't recognize Truly.
So those are basically just like hard seltzers. Yeah.
Mike's Hard Seltzer?
Yeah, hard lemonade, totally. Yeah, that's malt based.
Wendy has a show and tell.
I have a show and tell.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll show you.
samples?
Yes, if you like.
The visual aids can easily turn into samples. So currently, yeah, you have a range of products that are malt based. They're primarily malt based. The industry figured out a way to synthesize malt into like a very raw, high potency form, more or less malt moonshine, where it's flavorless, colorless. So then they can come up with these recipes where they get their flavor profile the way they want it, and then they just add the malt to dilute it to the desired ABV. And so you're seeing a range of products hit the markets over the last few years that use that method.
So that's all malt based.
Those products that are in second class stores right now that are in this ABV range
So
are
are
malt
these,
based primarily.
I guess I was just gonna jump ahead, is the manufacturers of these different products, malt-based versus alcohol-based, are they different, or like on a national level, does whoever is making these, they make both?
Yes, yeah, a lot of this right now is the national players. Our local distilling industry, there's a handful of them that are currently doing product lines with the spirits. And there's several that are looking to get into it, but their desire is to have access to 800 outlets as opposed to being limited to the 80-ish current 82 outlets. So the way I see it is it's a market that's developing. Our players within the state of Vermont are looking at this as an opportunity. They just want broader market access. And I think
The distillers do.
correct, yes.
And
Also the way I kind of see it is how craft beer developed, right? Like you had a few small players back in the 2008, 2010 range, and they were given more range within their products, how the legislature shaped policies, and they really built up a robust industry. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say that local distillers are going to do the same thing, but I see it as like an equal playing field for them to.
what's the trend nationally?
The trend nationally right now, there's a very robust growth within these hard seltzers,
So hard seltzers, we already have hard seltzers in
Yes.
the grocery store.
sorry, spirits again. Yeah,
Okay. The
But those are
spirit-
all malt based.
the hard seltzers, yes.
Yeah, so I'm talking, this bill is going to expand the amount of product that can be sold in grocery stores, right?
Correct.
What's the trend nationally? Is that the way states are going? They're allowing these kinds of things in grocery stores, or are we at cutting edge or what?
No, I think we're not at the forefront of this from what I've seen.
What have other control states done?
Control states right now, what is the average? I might defer over to.
Because this is giving up a piece of income for a control state.
Oh, incorrect. Yes, it is. It is getting products off of the shelf.
And onto another shelf.
Yes. So it would be putting it into the private distribution industry's hands. Yes.
So who benefits the most in this change?
In this change, the way I see the benefit of moving these 4 to 5 wines out of the DLL control is it provides them an opportunity to actually put other products into their shelf space that are higher profit and higher margin, more like high-end tequilas, bourbons, things of that nature. Where this product line now being removed from here, going into the other space, you'll see reduced margin capacity of the DLL because they're obviously not the wholesaler of the product, but the revenue estimates are more sales volume to be
So it
more
creates-
outlets, so it creates more sales.
So it creates more space for the 802 outlets, but it crowds out other product in a grocery store where they're not gonna move. It's gonna create bigger pressure on the grocery store shelves, right?
Well, at the grocery store, the market dictates that, the consumers dictate what they put on the shelves. We took testimony in our committee, in house general to that from one of our local grocers out of the Chittenden County area, one of the owners of Healthy Living, who is for this because he wants to see access for his customer base within his store to these product lines. And
How amusing. He calls it healthy living.
Healthy Living,
I-
the beer and wine
I'm
section.
not sure making more distilled spirits available is healthy living, but that's okay.
Well, I believe the thought process on that is it's not about that, like I said, the method by which it's synthesized, it's about the ABV within the product itself. So we currently allow up to 15% for malt. This bill caps the spirits at 12%. So we actually brought it down 3 percentage points as a ceiling. But most of the products float between like the 5 to 10 range within the industry. Sure, you'll see some things that creep higher, but the higher ABV within the canned cocktails to that 12-ish range is a little bit more of an outlier from what I see from product lists. And to people who are currently producing that, they're saying that it's 5, 7, 8 range primarily.
So malt is at the moment able to be sold 15% or less. That will continue, right? So all we're doing is putting a cap with this proposal, putting a cap on distilled spirit
Correct.
drinks.
Yes, so we created a new definition for these products, and that allowed us to be able to, instead of some of the conversations within this bill's subtext previously was trying to attach some definitions to existing definitions, and it was just getting.
So we're hearing about this first time this time. So you're saying that if it's distilled spirit, we're gonna let them be sold in grocery stores, but only if they're at 12%.
Correct.
And the other, right now, you can get a beer-based product in the grocery store at 15%.
Correct.
Why would you do that?
We were doing that, we were differentiating it to address the concerns people were having with the mentality towards spirits. It was sort of a negotiation point with some people.
Yeah, no, I remember there are other people in the house that have concerns about this being available on grocery store shelves.
Correct, and that was sort of like that with it just being spirits was the concern, because of the mentality that inherently they're worse for you, because it's a stronger, 40% alcohol, 80 proof or higher. But what we're talking about here is just an ABV range because it's a pre-mixed beverage. So the bill is originally drafted had it at 15, but during a drafting process, we
So
negotiated.
if I may be so bold, did you have a strong vote on the House floor on this?
The voice vote, yes.
Who's opposed to this?
Representative Brumstead raised some concerns.
Okay, well, I didn't mean legislators.
Oh, okay, that's, yeah.
Well, mostly the
Well, what industry people, or the people in the business,
Yeah.
who's opposed to this?
and who's driving it? I would add that. Who's driving this?
So,
We like to get to the heart of it.
yeah, no, I love bluntness. Yes, no, absolutely. So right now, the primary pushback is from the beer industry, both large scale international players
They
are
want it or
local.
they don't
No,
want
they
it?
are opposed.
But aren't they also, I assume they're smart enough that they're getting into this business themselves?
I cannot speak to how they are adjusting their business models.
What's the basis of their opposition?
Excuse me?
What's the basis of their opposition?
Primarily, in my opinion, it's concerns over market share and shelf space.
Shelf space seems to be a driver for the 802 stores as well, isn't it?
Shelf space is very valuable. That's how you make your money. And what you do with it with your product line, right? Yeah.
So who drove this bill? Who was the driver on wanting to make this change?
On this piece, I mean, it's been floating around for a while. Senator Hunter put in a bill a few years ago. Representative Walz had this as a concept in our committee. I'm speaking to folks who are pro on this end from Alan Newman, Arts Riot, Farrell Distributing, obviously. They would like to see this portfolio expansion. So those
So
are the
they're a big distributor, in fact, they're like really very tied into Anheuser-Busch, so if one of their clients doesn't like it, they like it.
But they must benefit somehow if they like it so much. So how do they benefit?
Well, they're seeing the product, the consumption growth projections on this are looking very promising for this subset of beverage over the next 5+ years. So with what they saw with those hard seltzers I was discussing as a growth, nobody in the industry saw that coming. It hit a couple of years ago and it hit big. And now this is just another subset of this new product line. So seeing that in a broader marketplace is attractive to a lot of people.
Well, we hear a lot about the interests of manufacturers and the interests of distributors and the interests of the 802 stores. What about consumers?
I mean, the consumers I've spoken to, they would like to see easier access to it. You know, they and not just your average person walking up as well. Take the events and hospitality sector, for example. Say a wedding wanted to serve things. They could have Farrell drop off wine, beer, normal order. If they wanted to get several cases for a large wedding or a series of events, Woodstock, whatever, they would actually have to physically go and pick it up.
Or have it distributed with their liquor distribution?
Oh, you have to go pick that stuff up. Yeah. You have to physically go to a liquor store to buy liquor if you're a Class 3 license in the state of Vermont.
So you're saying that if you're having a wedding, and you want to have alcohol behind the bar, caterer or whoever's doing it has to go physically pick up the alcohol and put it behind the bar?
Spirits, yes. Wine, beer, no. So these would be available through your vendor.
So everybody already does that, though. I mean, everybody already, like the Woodstock Inn, as you brought up the Woodstock Inn, already has, for all their special events, they already are going to purchase,
Correct.
going to the outlet and picking up their distilled spirits.
Correct.
So
And
there's nothing new here.
well, the amount of space that you would need to bring this product, because it's so much larger, because it's pre-mixed. So if you were buying just like gin to make your own G&Ts, you just have to buy bottles. If you wanted these specifically for something, it's just a lot more volume, a lot more sort of, I'll use the word schlepping, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good word.
Yeah. So I felt it was appropriate for the context of the conversation.
So there's an insidious erosion of bartending I see here.
I've spoken to some people that actually welcome it due to staff problems.
Yeah.
They can just throw ice in 2 glasses, pop a can, done.
Yeah, not as good though. Anyway.
I'm not gonna
Out
disagree.
of a can.
I'm not gonna disagree, but given the staffing pressures at the
That's
moment,
just for the moment.
Yeah.
Right, got it. So it's a
So
consideration.
on the delivery side, if I'm catering an event, I can call the grocery store, a lot of grocery stores now have delivery service, and they can bring out my beer and wine right to the event.
no, you cannot buy from a second class and resell to the public. It has to come from your distributor.
So is there any delivery advantage by expanding this to ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, say like you're doing an offsite event, like whatever it is, you're doing like a tent event is more the concern than maybe more traditional hotels where you'll get your X amount of kegs, your X amount of cases of beer and wine dropped off. These cases of pre-mixed canned cocktails would show up with that.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just a little confused because of what you said. Can't use it for a second event or something. You still have to go pick it up at the store. So I was asking, with this bill,
Yes,
could you order your ready-to-drink cocktails to be delivered to the tent?
correct. Yes,
But
Yes.
right now you can't,
you cannot.
but you can do that with wine and beer. You can bring it to the tent.
Correct.
But you can only get it from a distributor.
Correct.
It's okay, they've been doing this for a while. It's not like this is like a
What do you mean
change
by
business.
distributor?
No, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're adding a product line to accept.
I guess I just don't, what do you mean by distributor? That's not the grocery store?
No.
You
Farrell
can,
is, yeah.
yeah, Farrell would be the same person delivering to the groceries.
Who are the other big distributors?
Baker is notable.
That's right.
Yep.
Right. Baker.
That's why the distributors are particularly in favor of this, because it increases their business.
Yes.
Correct, and they make, it sounds like they make more money,
Yeah.
so that's why they're interested.
Oh, no, certainly. And in my mind, it's just sort of a lot. The two products are essentially, in my mind, the same thing. Because I'm just taking, as I mentioned before, the method by which it's
Understand though, again, folks in favor and folks opposed as to the rationale. I can see distributors, it's more profitable for distributors to do this. Who's opposed and why?
The opposition I've heard at the moment, primarily from beer, and my sense has always been that it's about market share and shelf space within the second-class license structure.
Is the department not concerned about losing over $1 million in business?
I will let the department speak to that, but we've been having this conversation at length for a while. So, but I will let them go through the exit
So
plans.
it's not just the department, it's us, it's the state that will lose that revenue.
To that particular product, but again, you're creating shelf, it's back to the shelf space conversation. There's more shelf space being
So
created
is-
that other products can come in, will fill that shelf space.
So are you saying
They're higher profit products.
maybe, but volume often displaces high volume, high value. So are you saying bill is cost neutral, revenue neutral?
The projections on it, again, I will let her, Commissioner Knight, speak to the deeper finance pieces because that's her department. But my overarching goal with this is actually just seeing a pivot, reacting to what the market's doing, and the department then bringing in alternative products that will, in the end, in my mind, theoretically, be more profitable to both the department and the state.
So did you get a fiscal note on this?
Yes, Grant did run financials. Yeah,
Did it go, bill go to Ways and Means?
yes, past 11-0 at Ways and Means.
Okay, so was I correct in saying this is the heart of the bill? A lot of the other stuff are like tweaks in here.
Well,
Mr. Chair, I think it's very safe to say that. I mean, of course, tweaks need focus.
No,
but
we'll have,
yes.
we'll have to go through each section and explain it to us, but I just want to know what basically what's in here. And from what I heard, you said there were 4 things. And the only one that really stood out as a major change was this one.
Correct.
So-
Five total and 4 on the back end that are more sort of housekeeping.
so there's technical changes, there's the rename, you're getting rid of a position. It sounds like.
Yes, currently the department is allowed to have a commissioner and 2 deputies. We're adjusting the statute to say a commissioner and 1 deputy.
Right, and it's the rare product Raffles, it's the low alcohol. And do we have direct to consumer in here also?
There is no direct, that was removed.
Did you not-
Due to
So,
time.
okay, so you
Yes.
didn't do direct to consumer.
Our committee is actually taking testimony post crossover on it to mine down on that, and that's sort of its own Pandora's box.
Okay,
We've discovered there's a lot of inflow shipping coming from websites into the state in violation of statute. We're not capturing taxes on it. We would like to have a further discussion about it.
got it.
Yes.
So
because
that's
we
not
can't-
in here at the moment.
Not at the moment.
And so the other, is there a festival piece? Because I understand there are a bunch of concerns about our festival permits that we thought we'd done work on
Correct.
last year.
There was an interpretation on that.
To go to the Polina emails.
Correct. Yes, there's been a strong interest in cleaning up some language. There was an interpretation based on
So
what we
that's in
discussed.
here too.
That is not in there. This gentleman who is standing to my left.
That's John's question. Okay.
Correct.
Language cleanup. And then what was the other piece?
We had the raffles, we
Yeah.
had and then the staggered licenses.
That's right, thank you. I thought we'd done that also.
That was COVID pivot. So that, we only did that during like emergency. And we didn't put it in
I thought
section.
we got off of April 1st where everybody had to reboot.
I can address that when I'm not that testified.
We
Yes,
did address that though, right?
yes, we did. But I think that might have been just session law.
Was it last year that we did drinks to go and we could continue that for a couple of years, so it's not on the table right now?
No, because next year is the year that comes in.
Right.
Yeah.
My guess is it's not continued its rise, but that's it.
It's just existing. I've seen no numbers on it. Yeah.
But we need to have numbers. I hope somebody's keeping track of that.
Yeah.
Who? I'm just curious, for us to
We can-
assess that next year, who's keeping track?
I mean, I'm assuming that we can ask the license holders through surveys based on their sales, because that's all tracked to POS systems.
Okay, good. So there's
So
a
when you do
way
it to go, yeah, most POS systems are tracking those things. Yes.
POS.
Point of
product.
sale, little touch screens, we all have at our counters. Okay, so now I'm shifting hats to the guy who owns the
Yeah,
restaurant.
yeah, no, that's why I'm asking you.
Yes, no, most of our, if you have a POS system that is tracking your data in a way, I think you should, it would be, you'd be able to harvest that information.
So just to go to sort of move forward quickly, not that we're voting anything here, but the issues are, if we're satisfied that there's no monetary application, or perhaps to helps the revenues of the state, then the issue is whether we want to do this or not, and at what percentage level.
Correct. Yes,
Good, well, sugars it down real quick, it's good.
I try to do as much homework for you as possible before bringing it to you. I know everybody has a lot on their plates, so.
Okay, so thank you very much, Representative. You're welcome to stay or.
I'm gonna hang out for sure, yes, in case there's questions.
Commissioner, time deadline, because we have a choice here whether we want to go walk through the whole bill or.
I thought I would help you answer some of the questions you were asking of the representative, which really are more for the department to answer. I'll be brief, but I do want to answer some questions you had and sort of set the stage for the impetus behind this bill, because when you do hotel, I want you to understand it's at easier, I think, when you can see the products that we're talking about, and that was speaking of, sorry, my husband did a little quality control last night with the gin tonic. So there's an incomplete, I'm gonna take this off so
So
I
the
can.
limes come Wendy in some other place.
So for the record, my name is Wendy Knight, I'm the Commissioner of Liquor and Lottery. So to get to the heart of the bill, you talked about quickly, the fortified wines is a category that includes vermouths, port, sherry.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that.
That is so the one thing I want to be clear about is this is an administration priority that you see in this bill. So the 4 technical corrections, as we call housekeeping, that is the making sure in statute that third-class licenses can do rare spirits. To your point, Senator, they have been, but it's not in statute discovered. So we need to have it in statute. We're integrating the department. You all decided in 2018 to combine our departments, so we need to function more like a department, 2 departments. So we're eliminating the 1 deputy commissioner position. and we have one commissioner and one deputy. The staggered licenses, yes, to your recognition, Senator, we did have that. The dates, however, were for 19 and 20 or 20 and 21. That expired during COVID. We were not able to release our online licensing portal, which is the reason why we needed the staggered licenses. So the technical correction is allows those staggered licenses to take place during 2022 and 2023. Our online licensing portal will go live in June. And that is the idea is then we would have, you know, every quarter would be a cohort of the renewals of licenses based on county.
So it's an IT issue that we couldn't continue to do
The
staggered?
licensing portal wasn't ready, right? And COVID intercepted all of the ways we were doing renewals, as I understand it. I was the commissioner during COVID. So to your recollection, we did it, yes, but those years expired. So in order for us to move forward with the staggered license, we needed to say 2022 and 2023. And then the final technical correction is allowing us to do criminal background checks through the Vermont Criminal Information, thank you.
Center for
Right, which is the
Information.
correct way that we should be doing the criminal background checks. So that's the technical correction piece of it. The administration looked at, you know, I had many conversations with all kinds of stakeholders in the summer and the fall. People want different changes, including the special event permit. The governor's priority, as you know, is to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable. So one of the things that we looked at was taking fortified wines and having them be distributed in the private sector. A lot of those category of spirits are things that are used in cocktail programs at bars and restaurants. I would say the number one complaint that I receive from stakeholders is that they don't have access to that product for their cocktails, the vermouths, the sherries, and those kinds of liqueurs. So we think it makes sense to move those into the private sector. You're expanding the availability of those products that will help the bars and restaurants and the consumers for that matter. A lot of times you go into an Idaho Spirits store and you might see 2 brands of sherry. Well, there's a multitude of brands of interesting sherries, high-end sherries that we just can't carry. If you move it into the private sector, you're expanding the availability of those products.
But you're losing someone who can explain to you what the difference is between them and why that matters.
No. So not necessarily, because if you go to an 802 Spirit store, they're also a second-class license, right? So the bars and the restaurants are going to know what kinds of products they want, what kinds of vermouths they want. So we think that it makes sense to move that category into the private sector. The RTDs, so this is what we have right now.
So before you go on that,
Yes.
so
Sorry.
in addition to this new sort of evolving emerging product, RTDs, moving them to the grocery stores, you're also, the traditional fortified wines is also being moved to the grocery stores.
That's the proposition in this bill, yes, is to move the fortified wines into the private sector.
Yeah, so that's it. And that's 20% or less. 20%. By
23.
23, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew it was in the 20s, okay.
So again, that's primarily driven by a lot of the bars and the restaurants want access to this product. The only way, Matt was describing it to you, is that if you're a bar or a restaurant, you physically need to walk into an 802 Spirit store and purchase your alcohol for the same price and in the same way as a consumer does. Now, we're making changes to that, but that's for another conversation. It's not the way to do business. So if we can take some of this product, like the fortified wine, move it into the private sector, make those products more available for bars and restaurants to make those cocktails, we think that that makes sense, and to increase
Why
consumer
would the
choice.
same argument apply for vodka and gin?
Exactly. I mean, not the way to do business.
Well, fortified wines are usually distributed by, they're made by winemakers, and they're distributed like wine. So in the context of a fortified wine, a port and a sherry is similar to a wine, and that's the thought process of that. When you can make the argument that I don't think you're trying to make, that we shouldn't be a control state, we should have all of these products available in a second-class license. But what we're trying to
Actually, it sounds like you were making that argument, not us.
No, I'm making the argument that certain products don't need to be distributed in a control state in an 802 spirit store. And fortified ones is one of those categories that we think makes sense to be safely and efficiently delivered in the private sector.
And that's because of the existing delivery system that wines are presently being delivered to grocery stores. So the same people who make the wines are making the fortified wines.
Big
I mean,
difference.
I'm sort of hung up on the percentages, and you're making, there's one group of stuff that's at 12, 15%, and that's generally easily available to the public. A little more harder to get is the stuff, alcohol. This seems, I guess, alcohol can be what, anywhere from 18% to 100%, or?
So anything, the way the statute defines alcohol is, I think, greater than 1% ABV. So, right, like, so alcohol beer is between 1% and 16%. Wine is up to 16%. The way that for the fortified wine, we're trying to clean it up is it says, so vermouths are sort of mentioned in the existing statute, but there's no real definition of it. So we're trying to make it like if you're a fortified wine, which includes a vermouth, less than 23% alcohol, then that's a fortified wine. Anything more than 23% is a spirit. It happens to be this, that we're not concerned that a minor is going to select a $30 bottle of port in a grocery store if that's the concern, is access to, I mean.
Well, as you know from last year, that's my
Yeah.
concern about all these
Right.
distilled spirits,
Right,
you know, like candy on a grocery store. I mean, it is a concern. Jessica
I
and I have the
understand.
same concern.
I understand. This is why, well, for the RTDs, this is why I brought this in. So we have a compliance division, and I can share with you the compliance, like the underage minors are trying to buy beer and malt-based beverages. They're not trying to buy a bottle of sherry in an 802 spirit store. So that's not a concern of ours from the fortified wines perspective. I hear what you're saying. You're
I'm not concerned about sherry and port, which is, I mean, and vermouth,
Right.
right, all.
So that was the motivation to have the fortified wines. The one thing we made sure to do in the bill, because it is a higher ABV, is things like serving sizes at a festival and things like shipping. We wanted to make sure that we contained those. So we didn't allow the same sort of provision that exists with wine, with fortified wines, because we understood that. So for example, when you go to a festival, there's different limit sizes based on ABV. So we kept the fortified wines in with the spirits limit because of the higher alcohol content. Do you understand? So that's,
Absolutely.
we were definitely looking, the only thing we wanted to do from the administration perspective is move those into the private sector so that you gave more availability and choice to consumers in terms in bars and restaurants.
So how much revenue are you giving up with fortified wines?
Well, we're not giving up any revenue because we will replace that with products. So I will get it, right?
Okay.
So we have a number of SKUs. We are limited based on kind of our warehouse size right now. You know, we've been talking about this for a
We
while.
had as a priority for years to build more warehouses.
That's what I keep hearing. I keep hearing that. It's not the capital bill. I keep hearing that.
Yes, but it needs an advocate. So when did your department stop being an
Oh,
advocate?
we're not. I haven't stopped advocating for it.
Okay.
So when we take the RTDs, right, and we move them out of the DLC and we move them into the private sector, and I'll get into why we think that makes sense, then that frees us up for other inventory. We're not going to leave a hole in the warehouse. We're not going to leave a hole in our SKUs. We're going to replace them with other products. So what we lose when we take the RTDs out of the DLC is we lose the markup, okay? So the markup, we buy the product, cost of goods, we have a markup, that includes the 5% excise tax. When you move that out of the private sector, you lose that markup. So we're gonna move these products to the private
Yeah, but
sector.
who keeps the markup? Because that
So
product's
now
already
this
been-
markup will go to the private sector. The private sector will fix, so you'll move this to the private sector. Then you have retailers, wholesalers, and
and
manufacturers.
distributors.
The wholesale, yes, wholesalers, distributors, the 3 tiers. You have the retailers, the grocery stores, you have the distributors and the wholesalers, right, which are the Farrells and the Baker, and then you have the manufacturers, which are
Right.
Bombay and Caledonia Spirits.
So, but before you leave this.
Yes,
This goes over here.
correct.
It's been being charged what here? And what will it be charged there? Is it going to, the new price of that will be much reduced as a result of your no markup over here? Or is just somebody gonna
So the-
maintain the markup?
Yes, so obviously the retailers want their markup, the wholesalers want their markup, right? And that's how that
But the
private sector
State
works.
isn't gonna make any money on that.
No, not necessarily. Like, so you're taking 80, this is the market right now for the 80 stores. You're taking that and you're expanding that market to 800 stores.
I get that piece, I get that piece.
So you're-
But if you charge $15 for a
For
product,
this,
yeah, let's,
yeah,
so I get that you have a markup and you
Yeah.
have that.
Yep.
You move it here and it's
Right.
gonna be sold for $15. Who makes that
the
markup
private
difference?
sector makes the markup. It's a combination between those 3 tiers, the manufacturers, the retailers, and the distributors. The private businesses will make that markup. They will pay their business taxes and their property taxes.
That's why they're interested. And I get why you're interested in
Right.
getting rid. But that's why they're, when
well-
we ask who benefits, that's who benefits.
So who else benefits is the consumers, and Senator Brock, you were talking about that before, because consumers want this product. So right now we have beer, which is 8.2%, wine, which is 11.5%, and the hard seltzer, which is based on, it's not spirits, even though it markets itself as a cocktail, it's not spirits. This is malt based. This
Right.
is 8%. This is the spirits, which is 5.9%.
Got it.
So to us, these are all as long as they're 12% or 15% or 10% or whatever that magic number is, as long as these are all the same ABV, they should be sold the same way in the same locations. There's no reason to have this highest growth category. Consumers really like this. They're selecting this over the sugary hard seltzer, which is malt based. They're selecting this over wine, and they're selecting this over beer, which is why the beer folks don't like this because it's competition, right? The wine folks last year, I didn't think liked it, but they're kind of quiet. And to your point that who's in it, this is a spirits-based company. This happens to be a great local beer, but beer companies are getting into it. So you have Anheuser-Busch beer, we think of. Cutwater is one of their big spirits-based beverages. So it's all blending. You have beer companies making spirits, you have spirits company making malt-based beverages. There's no policy reason why, there's no public safety reason why these should be distributed and sold separately. There isn't, right? Like, let's make it, consumers don't know, they think, oh, this is an RTD, this is a canned cocktail. They don't know that this doesn't have spirits in it. So let's make this consistent. Let's expand the market. So you're taking 80 stores and now you're bringing it to 800 stores, and that gives you the ability to make more money on the sales side. Now, to your point on the markup, again, these products go to the private sector. DLC doesn't get that markup on these, but we're going to bring in other products because we're in the business of selling spirits, right? So we're bringing in, we have now room to bring in the growing mezcal category, or we have room to bring in the premium RTDs. Now remember, this isn't the totality of these spirits-based ready to drink. There's a whole nother category, which are the larger bottles, right? 750 milliliter, much higher proof, much more expensive, have a higher markup. And that's our strategy, is to bring more of those products in to replace this. This is grocery store stuff. This is convenience store stuff. Our stores should be really selling the liquor, the bottles, and the things that are the higher alcohol content. That's what should really be in an 802 spirit store. So there's other high growth categories, flavored tequilas, mezcals, I've talked about, and the more premium RTDs. That to me makes much more sense for the state to be selling in our spirit stores.
Premium RTDs in terms of the percentage of alcohol.
Yeah.
They're premium because they're more expensive
And they're higher
and they
percent
have
of
higher
alcohol.
alcohol. So when we say premium category, we're talking about price. We're not talking, I mean,
But you're also talking about alcohol by volume.
no question, we're not suggesting that alcohol, anything that's above 12% stays within the DLC. The way that there are no we talk canned cocktails, there are none of these that are cans that are above 12%. Most of these are in 6 to 8%. So to your point, like, we allow wine and beer up to 15% or 16%, why are we reducing to 12%? Like, from a policy perspective, that doesn't make sense, but as Byron, Representative Byron was suggesting, it's to appease some of the folks that are concerned that a spirit is now in the grocery store. But to me, there is no distinction. It's the ABV that matters, right? Like, historically,
Right, so can I go just back to the fortified wines?
yes.
I get confused, you keep focusing on the ABV, and then, but for some reason, it doesn't matter with fortified wines.
Because the fortified wines are a very different product that the consumer isn't coming in and necessarily buying. The fortified wines, yes, people buy sherries and people buy ports, but that growth is like flat, 1%, 2%.
Need to work on that.
So the reason why we're suggesting the vermouths and the sherries and the fortified wines go into the private sector is really to help the bars and the restaurants, the hospitality sector, have access to a greater variety of product that they can use in their cocktails and sell at their bars and their restaurants. That's a very different argument and a really different policy perspective than these. So that's what's generating our suggestion that we move the fortified wines into the private sector.
Will the markup change,
It could change.
and might it go up or down, or do you have any projections right?
That's a question
Because
for,
there's certainly more hands-on
yeah,
in this model.
yeah, and that's a question. So that's a question for the wholesalers and distributors. They know that this price sells right now at 802 Spirit Store for, I forgot what I bought this for. Let's just say $15. So they know that the consumer is used to getting that.
Now, that's the challenge.
Correct?
Yeah.
So they know that they need to keep this when it's in their stores at $15, otherwise people are gonna buy something else. And that's what Representative Byron was saying
Is there any difference in terms of what they will pay to get it than what you pay now? Might they be better suited to negotiate better pricing?
sure, absolutely. Could be. I mean,
So at the moment, you mark that up roughly 50%.
mhm.
So the $15 sale price, Randy, represents Wendy's 50% markup. When it goes to a grocery store, it's a whole new, I mean, the distributor's gonna try and keep that 50% markup.
But
But
it
the
may not,
consumer-
in terms of competition alone, may drive that price down.
Well, it could if the distributor was willing to take less. But at the moment, the consumer's used to paying $15 for that.
There's a limitation on distributors also in Vermont, is there not?
Correct.
Now, how does that compare to other states?
I
We
think,
have in effect a limitation or controlled distribution market.
well, we do an 802 Spirits store, sure, we're the sole distributor that, spirits. So you're
So there are
moving,
three big distributors,
Correct.
you, Farrell, and Baker.
no, you can't compare us. We are the only distributor of distilled spirits.
Right, no, I
We
got
don't
it,
distribute wine or beer.
but I'm just talking about distributors.
Sure, but
booths.
the private
There's three.
sector. But there's types of booze,
Yeah.
okay, so there's distilled spirits, which we are the only distributor, and then there's distributors that can do the hard seltzer and the beer and the wine, and Farrell, Baker, Kelma, I think there's, so there's more distributors. To your point, Senator, they're going to be competing for, remember, this is a high growth category. In Vermont alone, it grew 65% last year,
So
so
when you say distributors of that particular product, does the same distributor handle multiple products, or is there channels such that one distributor handles this particular brand, Bombay, another distributor handles another brand?
that's
So that
correct,
there's a specific distributor, in effect, per brand in
Correct.
Vermont and only one.
correct.
So there is effectively the same kind of monopoly, isn't there?
Well, then the way they work it now is they do contracts, right? So if you're a supplier, you contract with the distributor to sell your product to the retailers.
Is that common in non-control states the same way?
Yes, it is. That's how it's set up. I used to own a craft beer store in New York, and I had, 3 or 4 or 5 distributors, and they had the sole rights to a certain kind of beer. So if I wanted a certain kind of beer in my store, I had to buy it from a certain distributor. So to your point about revenue, the bill right now, Graham did the joint fiscal, it passed out of House Ways and Means, and it was revenue neutral. So the markup that the department might lose as a result of this product, this markup only, going to the private sector, the way House Ways and Means address that is they increased the direct app that the department gives to the general fund. So the general fund isn't losing money because of that direct app. Now keep in mind, and I was making the argument, and I would continue to make the argument, if it's $1 million that they're suggesting is the markup for this category, right? We're not losing that $1 million markup. We're replacing that $1 million markup with another product.
And do we know that replacement, that there is enough demand for that product in Vermont to make up the difference?
Yes, because we know that we have the other fast-growing category. Again, your premium RTDs are going to stay with us. That's a fast-growing category. Your mezcals, your flavored tequilas. So we're going to replace, we're in the business of making the state money. So we're not going to move a product to the private sector and not replace it with a product that's going to make that markup. That's what we do. We sell spirits and we make money for the state and we give money to the state.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, as opposed to replacing one with another and making it revenue neutral, why don't we just add the premium product and make more money for the state and build a warehouse to do more?
Well, and I think in the long term, we should build a warehouse, but there's other policy reasons why this kind of product doesn't make sense to stay within the liquor control. Right, you see that this is a grocery store product, basically at the same ABV. So, yeah, I mean, once we have a bigger warehouse, we'll have the ability to have a lot more product, which will mitigate our out of stock issues. Right now, we're a small state, so the suppliers are only going to give us so much quantity because we only have so much of a market. So if we were able to get a bigger warehouse, then we could be doing some more bulk buys and having space to have some of that product in. But we don't have that right now. So I love where you're going. I love the thinking, but right now I'm trying to address the demands of the marketplace, which are the industry is evolving. They're making this kind of product, consumer choice. They want this kind of product. And my feeling is that whatever laws that we have in place need to evolve with the industry. If the state is going to be in the business of running businesses, i.e. lottery and liquor, it needs to make sure that those laws are keeping pace with the evolution of the industry and consumer choice. Otherwise, don't be in the business of trying to run a business.
When was the last time that there was an independent analysis as to whether or not we should be a control state?
I think that was done in 2017 and 2014. I can give you those because
I assume they're out online.
Yes, and I can send them to you because
Yeah.
one of the things that we did this year is we took advantage of the Vermont Certified Public Management Program where you have state employees that can do a research project. And I asked them to look at the distribution model and whether or not it made sense for Vermont to be in a control state where you're distributing in those 80 stores. So I'll have the findings of that.
This was a study that was done by state employees.
Correct. It was done by state employees. I'll be looking at it in the next couple of weeks.
So the last one, Wendy, in 17 was done by?
So there was one that was done by the auditor.
I thought there was
the
one
state
that was
auditor.
done,
I think that was a while ago. I will send that information to you. I'm pretty sure that there was one done in 17, but that might have been a retail analysis. I might be confusing that, but I'll send that to you because I had to gather that information for the management project team that was looking at it. Because I think you need to, as policymakers and legislators, we need to be asking constantly, is this working? Does this make sense? How do we do it different? Who benefits? Where does the money go? I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. Is it serving Vermont well? Is it serving us from a health perspective? Is it serving us from a revenue perspective? Is it serving the consumers, et cetera?
So, on a slightly different topic, I'm probably not that way, it's not good, but do we cure or take care of the governance structure of the department? What's the relationship you have with the liquor control board? Or is that not exist anymore?
Oh, no, it exists. Yeah, so the Liquor Control Board is a quasi enforcement body. And so when we issue tickets for violations and people don't like that we've done that, or they want to appeal, then they can go to the board.
Didn't we have some issues with the last commissioner, whether he was under the governor's control or the liquor board's control? Did we fix that?
No, we haven't fixed that. I have many bosses.
So are you too?
Well, I
Yeah, you
have.
have a second, yeah.
So sure, I mean, I was appointed by the governor and, I work in the executive branch, I'm part of his cabinet, so he's my boss. And then I have a liquor board that has 5 people and I guess they're my boss. And technically I have how many legislators that have oversight of the department.
So speaking of bosses,
Yes.
how does the liquor board view these proposals?
So the liquor board doesn't have statutory jurisdiction over policy. They have statutory jurisdiction over certain things and it's not policy.
So how do they feel?
I think they're on board with what the governor wants. I know that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when there was a different commissioner, there was a different feeling about RTDs. And I think the board,
I remember.
yeah, and the board, which was kind of odd because they don't have policy jurisdiction. But I saw that they had a feeling they didn't want the RTDs to come out of the DLC. That was in 2019.
Yeah, and I remember.
Yeah, and you have a new commissioner, so.
Yeah.
And, this is a policy directive of the administration, so, who directs the policy of the department.
Right.
Okay,
All right.
yes. Tucker, why don't you join us? We'll try and plow through this.
I'll leave this here, Tucker, and we'll get thirsty.
Anybody else want to speak?
No, wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna-
Matt, thanks a lot.
Yes, we're going over 226, so I don't want to miss that.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yes, thank you.
We love those bills.
Working on it.
And then I got given this miracle drug after I saw you. And that gave me a fabulous thing for migraine. It's fabulous. Because last time I saw you, I was really under the
I'm
weather.
gonna have to ask the senator about the miracle.
Yeah,
Yes. Anyway, good luck all.
yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Office of Legislative Counsel. With your permission, I'd like to start towards the end of the bill and move through some of the easier sections that we can cross off somewhat quickly as part of the walkthrough.
Okay.
So
That
that's,
sounds like starting easy and ramping up is a great idea.
yes, it's the best way to run, the best way to walk through.
Okay.
So that starts on page 46 in section 45 of the bill. It's under the reader assistance heading, DLL, criminal background checks. There are 2 sections that we can take together, section 45 and section 46. Section 45 deals with background checks under Title VII for alcohol and tobacco. And section 46 deals with Title 31. These are background checks concerning lottery applicants. So in each section, this is subject to approval of the board. The commissioner shall establish an agreement with VCIC, the Vermont Crime Information Center, for the purpose of obtaining criminal history records from the Federal Bureau of Investigation to review applications for any liquor or tobacco license, section 45, or lottery license under section 40. 6.
So,
Just a very brief question as we go. Why do we need board approval to do this?
is this liquor board? What board is this?
Board of Liquor and Lottery.
Does that go to the question we're asking two bosses? I mean, if we want them,
We want the commissioner to do it, like it's ready to do that.
You can strike that line and just have the commissioner do this, mandate that the commissioner does this.
And why hasn't it been done before? I mean, we've had the Vermont, the BCIC's been around for a long time. Why haven't we used the BCIC before?
Those last 2 questions are fantastic questions for the department and the commissioner. This was a component of the DLL proposals for this particular session. So including that clause with board approval.
Well, one question regarding board approval, is the board involved in the event that there is an adverse finding from the criminal record check? Is the board involved in resolving that?
Or are they liable?
This is all part of the license application process, which to my knowledge does go to the Board of Liquor and Lottery.
So the license goes to the board, and does the board then do the approval rather than the commissioner?
I believe so.
So to give you a little background, apparently a few years ago, we were doing it through BCIC. And we were told by BCIC that we did not have statutory authority to do our criminal background checks through BCIC. So then we started doing through other ways. The other ways they're not as effective or efficient. They also don't ensure that the expunged records don't show up. So one of the reasons why we want to put it in statute is to go back to the proper way we should do criminal background checks that will ensure that those records that were expunged don't show up. So when we issue a license, we do a criminal background check to, does the applicant have any felonies? If they have a felony within the last 3 years, that goes to the board, and the board can issue those licenses based on conditions. So that's how the board plays
So
into.
if it's over 3 years, you don't go to the board?
I'd have to look. So there's
You guys
a,
been in
I'm
jail
sorry,
for the
so
past 5 years?
it's a felony of the last 10 years. I'm sorry, a
Okay.
misdemeanor of the last 3 years. There's a mechanism by which if it shows up that there's a misdemeanor or a felony, I forgot, it must be 10 years for the felony. It goes to the board. And in the last, I'm told by our licensing department, the last 25 years, we've never denied a license based on a criminal background check. But what we do is the board will issue the license based on condition.
Yeah, I was gonna say they condition.
They can condition the license.
But, so the board does issue licenses.
Well, technically, because it's in statute, but in practice, the way it works is the department issues the license, and then every month we go to the board and we say, here are the licenses that we issued. So the board, in effect, is giving the authority to the department to issue those licenses. And we don't present a list of licenses that we need to get a board approval from and don't issue them until we get board approval. The only license that goes to the board is if there are particular problems and they need to issue them based on conditions. So practically that's how it works. We have a licensing department and they get the applications and the check and check, great, there's your license.
so
Here's your license.
this language came from the administration, and before you sign this user agreement, you want the board to understand what's going on.
I think that's just because of the language that's existing all throughout Title VII right now that has the board having a role in this. And I do think, to your point, that's probably something that should be cleared up at some point. What role does the board really have and what role? I mean, technically in statute, the department is defined as the board and the commissioner, which is not functionally how it works. So what's functionally how it works is not reflected in statute. I think that that's probably something we want to address at some point.
Yeah, we just did a huge statutory cleanup. One of Damien's departing liquor gift to us was cleaning up the statute, so it's frustrating we didn't do
I
that.
was his law clerk at that time, so that was my first legal.
Right,
Right. So,
so until we clean it up,
so
maybe we
at-
leave it
at
as.
46 is the same thing applies to the lottery agents.
Correct. Moving on to section 47, this is dealing with the appointment of one deputy commissioner instead of two. You'll notice that this is striking out references to the deputy commissioner of the state lottery and condensing it down so that it is the commissioner of liquor, or deputy commissioner of the liquor lottery.
Is someone losing a job or is it vacant?
It is vacant.
Oh, somebody did lose a job.
No, I got promoted. I got promoted from
Oh,
deputy
you were,
commissioner
that's
to
right.
commissioner. And Andrew Collier was appointed in Sabina, House
Right,
of
Sabina went to natural resources.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so everybody shifted around.
Okay, where to?
Section 48, page 48. This is the raffles for the rights to purchase rare and unusual spirits. Two changes here. First, eliminating 4 to 5 lines from the raffle since they will no longer be within the exclusive jurisdiction of DLL. And second, allowing third-class licensees to purchase a raffle ticket, expressly allowing third-class licensees.
Could you, just as a general rule of thumb, some of us are not as well versed as Senator Clarkson is, but when you use the terms licenses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can you do a brief aside, just remind us what they are?
Primer reading,
Till I
primer up on the wall.
till I get it straight in my head,
Absolutely. Third-class licensees are restaurants and bars that are serving spirits.
Okay.
So the third-class license on premises serving of spirits that are acquired through DLO.
And second class, you heard a lot about are the grocery stores, the stores that serve wine and beer.
We'll call them retail.
Retail, it's a retail
outlets, right? They're retail outlets that sell alcohol for off-premises consumption, sealed containers.
You don't know what they're doing in those aisles. They-
Oh boy.
So this is, these are raffles and giving away like premium, I've heard about some of these. It was one-
Happy Van Winkle is
Exactly, that's the one I heard at
yes.
the Capitol Plaza.
Well, we-
It was like that,
Yeah,
except the,
so the way that some of these,
Rasa, or whatever the name of the guy is on the Capitol Plaza, he had some incredible.
Fred,
Fred, or Sharon,
yeah, Bashara.
he had some incredible ones.
He-
So you can raffle that off, and now we're saying that only people who can buy it are,
any member of the public and third-class licensees.
Like
So-
Fred, who'd like to
Those
have it
restaurants.
so that he can sell these as a fun addition to their menu.
Now, conceptually, getting to the Pappy Van Winkle example, the reason for this rare spirits raffle, at least when it was discussed 6 years ago when I first started here,
Right,
is that some of these manufacturers have such a small allotment that comes to Vermont that it's not equitable for DLL because they can't sell it in all 879 or 802 spirits outlets. So instead of selecting one store with one bottle of Pappy Van Winkle to sell, they put it up for a raffle. The way the statute is written now is that a member of the public can purchase a raffle ticket. And this clause is making it express that a license holder, a restaurant or bar, can also get this raffle ticket to
right, which makes a
acquire
lot
that
of
bottle of
sense,
Pappy.
which makes a lot of
or
sense
whatever it
for the
might
friends of the world.
what about, is there a reason to limit it to bars or restaurants? I mean, are there other kinds of licenses like event licenses, maybe they want to buy it?
No.
So
And
waste
the
that.
reason for no is that the only other license that might make sense is a second-class license because they're a retail outlet that would also be potentially selling this product to the public. But the retail outlets that sell spirits to the public are the 802 spirit stores. And I'm not certain whether 802 spirits outlets are permitted through agency to enter the raffle.
They're not.
But they can sell it
Well-
on their own.
No, so the only way you sell spirits in Vermont right now are through the 802 spirit store. That's including if you're a bar or a restaurant. So the reason that we have, and this is what Tucker's explaining, the reason there exists a raffle or a sweepstakes to begin with is because there's not enough product. These are in high demand all across the world. And so the manufacturer of Pappy or, EG Cat, whatever it is, only makes so much, and they're only giving so much to Vermont or to Kentucky. So rather than try to like figure out which 802 spirit store might get that opportunity to have that product and sell it, we do it through a spirits or in a rare spirits raffle or sweepstakes. We think that's more equitable, gives everybody sort of a fair chance of consumers of purchasing this. We don't give it away. The raffle and the sweepstakes gives them the opportunity to buy it at our price. So, which is quite a deal because our price is a reasonable price. So if it's a rare spirit, we don't mark it up because it's the fewer quantity. We don't do that supply and demand. So third-class licenses, the bars and the restaurants have had access to this raffle and spirits sweepstakes for 6 years. But what we discovered this year is that there is no express permission for them to do that. So all I'm merely asking for is the express permission to do something that evidently we've been doing for 6 years, which benefits the bars and the restaurants. They want to have access to it too. When tourists come up or consumers come up and they can, mix it in their cocktails or sell it for $20 a bottle and make money, and that's great. But let them have access to
So
it.
what's the reason for taking out fortified wines?
Because now fortified wines aren't considered a spirit. We're trying to move them to the private sector so they wouldn't be a rare spirit.
Right, but we haven't done that yet.
I know, but just this whole language that Tucker went through, we went through every single piece of statute to take that out.
But
If you decide not to move fortified wines into the private sector, then we would have to go back to the bill and make all those changes.
So you're saying the reason, let's assume we do
Yeah.
move fortified wines out, why wouldn't they be a product that you're conducting a raffle for, but you don't have control over those?
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not coming through the 802 spirit stores. We're not the distributor of those anymore.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
49.
49, this is the staggered license provision that is described to you. It's the exact same language that was passed for 2020, 2021, and is now extending to 2022 and 2023. And Senator Clarkson, your deja vu moment was correct. 7 VSA section 205 was amended in the budget bill to remove the April 30th date from statute. And previous to that, every single license that the department issued expired at midnight on April 30th.
I remember
That
this.
got eliminated, so that now the statute just says that it expires 1 year after the date that it was issued. And this transitional provision would make it clear that at least for the next 2 years, the department has express authority to stagger the existing licenses throughout the next 2 years until their system can catch up and they can start to read the 1 year renewals on any date of the year or on established quarterly dates, whatever might make sense for their computer system.
So in this section, do we deal going forward with once they've caught up and are staggered and the system is up and running?
We have to go back and do this again.
Yeah, do we have to, can we just let them go forward in a staggered fashion?
You can allow them.
Of course, after drinking a certain amount of distilled spirits, you're staggering anyway.
The department will be able to move forward with staggered licenses after this.
So there's no more statutory change required for that to happen.
We don't have to see this again.
Correct. And my understanding is the only reason you are seeing it again is because the system is not caught up to the statutory authority to start.
Which
rolling
we
these
had
licenses
expected
out.
it would, as I recall. Right. Good, well, we'll hope the system catches up.
June launches.
June launch, okay.
To briefly note, there are 2 different effective dates in the bill. The staggered licenses is effective upon passage, just to get that out there so that they can start working with licensees. Everything else is going to be effective July 1st, 2022. One thing to note about this summer, July 1st, 2022, noting it because it came up in earlier discussions, July 1st, 2022 marks the date that some of the franchise agreements, so those distributor agreements, are going to be subject to a different statutory framework that includes a requirement for cancellation terms to be built into
Right,
these
which we did.
territories.
We did a
2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years ago, we did that.
Yes, it had a delayed effective date. Some of the terms became effective in the interim, such as the small producer, small manufacturer provisions, 50,000 barrels or less of essentially craft beverages would fall outside of sections 701, 702, 704 franchise statutes. But everything else becomes effective this summer, including the required terms for cancellation. And any franchise that, is perpetual under current terms, but doesn't have a cancellation provision that's been agreed to by both parties can be canceled with good cause. So some of these new beverages will be entering the market at the same time that the franchise scheme is seeing the sea change.
So is the rest of the 45 pages of the bill, are they all connected to the industry here?
Yes.
Are they really?
Yes. Sections 2 through 44
Oh my God, you're right.
contain the changes to the fortified wine sale and distribution structure and the introduction of ready-to-drink spirits beverages and the change of sale, distribution, and tax rate for those particular beverages. Section 2, the definitions, this is essentially structuring the types of beverages in the entire market following in the next 42 some odd sections. So if you will jump first to the definition of fortified wines, which is in subdivision 18 on page 2. And I'm working off the unofficial version, by the way.
So, yeah,
The unofficial version doesn't have the bill as introduced, whereas the official version has that introduced.
that has all those bloody stripes through it. It's very hard to read. It's much easier to read this.
Right. The bill as introduced was a committee bill, but it was amended by House Ways and Means on the floor, so you should be looking at the as passed by House.
It is.
So in subdivision 18, the fortified wines definition, the range for what is a fortified wine is 16 to 23%. And this will come up later, but a fortified wine contains less than 16% alcohol by volume will, moving forward, be considered a vinous beverage. It's going to be important when we get to it later. Above 23% will be considered a spirit. There's a clarification here. Previously, all vermouths, regardless of their ABV, were considered fortified wines. Here, this is saying that all vermouths containing more than 16, less than 23, putting it in the same range, are fortified wines. Subdivision 25 contains the definition for what is a ready-to-drink spirits beverage, an RTD. The alcoholic beverages containing more than 1%, but not more than 12 ABV, obtained by distillation, chemical synthesis, or through concentration by freezing. These are the exact same methods for the definition of what is a spirit. Mixed with, and this is critical to some of the distinctions I'll bring up later, mixed with non-alcoholic beverages. So these are spirits mixed with non-alcoholic beverages, flavoring, coloring materials. RTDs can also contain additional flavors, coloring, and other ingredients. Moving along to the definition of spirits.
Sorry, I just wanted, I know this is silly, but, I don't, so one other name for these is, canned cocktails. But they don't actually all come in cans, or is canning a key piece of preserving the fizziness if you have a gin and tonic, as opposed to plastic or other things. So is canning not a key piece of this?
It is, and
So that's not mentioned here, is it?
when we cover the definition of spirits, that's when we will get to the canning. Well, it's not a requirement, but the volume of the container ends up being a requirement. So on in a moment. The requirement for canning was in an earlier version of this. It was introduced by Senator Hooker and Representative Waltz, and the can requirement was eliminated in the House's version of this.
Okay.
Now it's just a volume requirement, and I'll get to it in a moment.
So you passed over the change on page 3. So manufacturer's license or enterprise doesn't, there's a different license for spirits somewhere?
Yes, and we will get to this in the licensing section. Something that I'll note throughout is that fortified wines and ready-to-drink spirits beverages has been added everywhere throughout Title VII where there needs to be clarification, either about the inclusion of fortified wines and ready-to-drink spirits beverages, or a change to the distribution scheme or sales scheme where, for example, fortified wines are entering the system. We don't need retail permit anymore. Senator, I will note that what you're looking at in the manufacturer section does become important later, because currently there are 3 types of manufacturer's licenses that are issued: malt beverages, vinous beverages, and fortified wines, spirits, and fortified wines. That is going to change so that the 3 categories would be malt beverages, vinous beverages, and fortified wines stays the same. But the 3rd license type would be spirits and ready-to-drink spirits beverages.
Which is slightly confusing because they're going to be, I mean, if this bill goes through as proposed, they'll be ready to drink spirits in a lower volume. So it's sort of confusing. Why bother introducing that? You have premium ones on one side and low-end ones on the other side. Lower volume ones on the other side.
I can address that if it's like.
Yeah, it just strikes me as.
The licenses are based on the, how the product, not ABV, right? So the licenses are either malt, vinous, fortified wine, and spirits. So even though these are proposed to be distributed because of ABV, the license isn't based on ABV. The license is given to a manufacturer who might have multiple products at multiple
I get that.
ABVs. So it's not, so we're just, it's based on a manufacturer of spirits might be making ready-to-drink spirits as well, like Black Flannel Distilling in Essex. They have a company and they're making spirits, which are above 23% ABV, but they're also making ready-to-drink cocktails, which are at 8%. It's still the same manufacturer making spirits. So you would have one license for a spirits manufacturer, one license for a beer manufacturer, one license for a wine and fortified wine manufacturer.
My question was just on 27. It seems like there's a manufacturer's or rectifier's license for beer, wine, and ready-to-drink spirits. I don't see a license. Oh, it says or spirits. So, okay, sorry.
Yes, so that last category is spirits and RTDs. Subdivision 40, which contains the current definition of spirits, is being modified to clarify when an RTD, this is on page 6, top of page 6.
Sorry? Oh man, you're such a long.
Page 8.
we work together so much, and yet I always forget to announce the page first. I'm trying to get better.
Okay, I'm trying to like channel you here, but yeah,
There's so much room for improvement.
Sorry. Pardon.
Top of page 6, subdivision 40 contains the current definition for spirits. What's being added at the end here is language that clarifies when a ready-to-drink spirits beverage is a spirit and not an RTD.
Got it, which we've just been discussing.
And I have a note for this when we finish. So
You don't want to share it now.
I will wait until the end to explain the mélange that has happened and that may need to happen to help eliminate some confusion.
Got
it. So spirits does not mean fortified wines or finest beverages to which spirits have been added during manufacture that contain less than 16% ABV. Eliminating those less than 16% fortified wines from the spirits. Spirits also means a ready-to-drink spirits beverage that contains more than 12% ABV, or is packaged in containers greater than 24 fluid ounces in volume. So the rules that would be applied here, if your beverage is spirits added to non-alcoholic products, is less than 12%, and is packaged in containers less than 24 fluid ounces in volume, it is a ready-to-drink spirits beverage. If the beverage you are making contains spirits, is more than 12% alcohol by volume, or is packaged in containers greater than 24 fluid ounces, it is a spirit that will remain under the jurisdiction of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. These definitions have moved around. House Ways and Means felt that the definition of RTD, which included this exclusion, saying what a spirit was circuitous. So they moved part of the definition to spirits here before you and retained just the definition of what an RTD is under the RTD definition. Since that time, more folks have become confused about the circuitous nature of the definitions and have proposed instead that the exclusion be built in elsewhere and that the definition of RTDs say less than 24 ounces in volume, less than 12% alcohol, anything else is spirit. So I can draft up a version of that if you would like to see it to help
That does
alleviate
simplify it.
some of the traverse you have to make through the definitions to understand what is a spirit, what is an RTD. Next big change here, subdivision 42, we're still on page 6. This is the vinous beverage definitions. And what is being added here is that vinous beverages will include beverages to which spirits have been added during manufacture, as long as it's under 16% alcohol. So those would include your fortified wines. Now, I highlighted this for the house. Conceptually, you have two beverage categories where you're adding spirits to the beverage, and yet there's this divide between them. If you add spirits to a non-alcoholic product, it's a ready-to-drink spirits beverage. It has to be under 12%. It has to be packaged in containers less than 24 fluid ounces. If you add spirits to a vinous beverage, a fermented beverage made from agricultural products, it's a fairly broad category, it is over here. It is a fortified wine under 16%. It's a vinous beverage. No limitation on the volume it can be packaged in, and it has a higher ABV. So the example that I gave to the house, if I add spirits, vodka to apple juice, it's a ready-to-drink spirits beverage. Can't be higher than 12%, has to be packaged in 24-ounce container or less. But if I add spirits to hard cider, it's over here, and it's a fortified wine. It can go up to 16% and be in bigger packaging. And the reason I highlight this is that these are all purity laws that define exactly what has to be in each beverage, and there could be downstream effects for how the market develops in the future when you have this sort of separation. For each of the next, let's say 30 sections, what is happening is that RTDs and fortified wines are being added to each statute in Title VII, where we deal with the retail market and distribution market for malt beverages and vinous beverages. And RTDs and fortified wines are entering that same market stream. So, starting with section 3, which is on page 7, fortified wines are removed from the rare products raffle. This happens again at the end of the bill. Section.
So may I just ask the commissioner one question, which is, are there rare fortified wines that, are there quite a few of those?
No,
So it's not giving up a whole lot of.
no. The things that are in the rare spirits are mostly whiskeys.
So there aren't very many rare fortified wines.
Correct.
Nice.
That may be their wine cellar.
I was gonna say, my father would disagree with this. And were he around to testify, he would, yeah, okay.
So Tucker, in an effort to move us along, you gave me an opening saying the next 30 sections are all cleaning up fortified wines and ready to drink. I don't think we need to go through section by section. If there's something you want to highlight to us, that's fine, but it sounds to me like it's an effort to clean the whole bill.
Well,
We assume that, so.
I talked about delivery, it's got like a whole 9 yards in here, yeah.
I can provide to the committee 2 things that I think would be helpful moving forward. I'll give you a section by section breakdown of what is happening for each of those sections where RTDs and fortified wines.
That would be super helpful.
And the second thing that I'll do is actually give you a chart of the.
Love
because
charts.
Lots of questions so far about alcohol by volume, 12% versus 16% for some of the categories. I'll give you a chart breaking down in the definitions where each beverage category breaks out. 1 to 16, 1 to infinity for spirits. And you can see what remains under DLL's exclusive control. and what
This
goes out.
is a question for anybody in the room really, but have other states distinguished the alcohol percentage differently for ready to drink versus 15%, I guess, is original 16%, as originally introduced it. I guess some people had reservations about putting too much food product with alcohol content on, whichever was available, objected it as a political compromise. People went to 12. Do you have knowledge or suspicion of knowledge of other states have? It doesn't sound consistent or pure to me. That you have a different thing. I'm just wondering what other states have done.
The only area where I've looked into this is in other control states, and I know that the commissioner and Jacqueline have put together research specifically for fortified wines and the
Difference there, yeah.
the difference there. In other control states, you know, the ABV comes into play whether the state is going to control the particular sales of a beverage, and there are at least 3 or 4 other control states that just have a level bar of ABV that they deal with. And for the most part, it's 20 to 23%, right? They just have a line there where regardless of the type of beverage, I think Michigan is an example, if it goes above that threshold percentage, it's within control of the state. I haven't looked at broader definitions for ready to drink spirits beverages to see where that particular line is drawn, at least for saying this is an RTD, not a spirit. But I can certainly do that.
And the question, I guess, when you introduced the bill originally, you had it at 15 or 16%, and then there was an objection. The administration's original proposal was just to have a little.
It wasn't the administration's original proposal 2 years ago. It was some other
Right.
entities were putting forth and they had it at 16%, which is why that's consistent with what the beer and the wine is, right? So that made sense from a policy perspective, from their perspective, to keep it at at that 16%. We can certainly follow up with you. The 12% isn't something that the administration directed. That was a conversation that happened in House General with whoever was testifying, the wine, the beer, that was, so from our perspective, as long as it's under 16%, most of the categories that we're talking about, the ready to drink are 6 to 8% anyway. So once you get above 12, 16%, they're more, they jump to like 20, 25%, 30%. They're clearly out of that category. So
Question, is there a different rate at which alcohol is absorbed into the bloodstream, whether it is distilled or malt or vinous? I mean, what's the impact rate in these three different categories?
I'm not a public health expert, so
Yeah, that would be.
I guess I'm not a clinician either, but the reason historically why you wanted to have lower quantities of, so when you do the scale, you can have it 12-ounce beer and 5 ounces of wine and 2 ounces of alcohol. The reason you have those different categories is because the ABV levels are different. Normally beer would be like 4 to 5 to 6% ABV. Wine is like 10 to 14% ABV, and spirits is above 23% ABV. So it's based on the alcohol by volume, right? So the reason, so that's basically, yes, 2% or 2 ounces of alcohol is the equivalent, and I think there are charts that we can give you that. 2 ounces of alcohol is equivalent to 12 ounces of beer and 5 ounces of wine in terms of alcohol content. So when you get to the RTD spirits, you don't have that distinction. They are at the same ABV, more or less, of the malt and the wine. And we can also follow up in terms of what other states are doing, how they're defining RTDs. Maine is a control state that had a similar exclusion, if you will, or a similar, RTDs, spirits moving into the private sector. So we can follow up.
What you described what happened in the House, it sounds to me like by going from 16% to 12%, it really didn't matter because there's no products out there between 12 and 16%.
That's correct.
They're ready to drink.
For the most part, yes. We went through the whole list, and most of these that would be excluded are far less than 12%.
Okay, so I think that's is there something, it could be a point for us to take a break and move on to sports betting, but is there more in here other than those cleanup sections in the bill?
There are 3 pieces
Okay,
that I'd like to highlight for you quickly. Sections 30 through 33, I'm highlighting this because there's a distinction here. This is the consumer shipping license.
Page.
My apologies. Page 32, and in the next 3 pages.
Okay.
So
How interesting, the sections actually line up roughly with the pages.
taken together, these are the statutes that govern the consumer retail shipping licenses. These are licenses that a manufacturer in state or out of state can acquire to ship their own products directly to a consumer. Currently, this is available to manufacturers of malt or vinous beverages. This is being expanded to include the RTD spirits beverages, not fortified wines. So that's a distinction here. RTDs can be shipped by manufacturers direct to consumer. Fortified wines cannot.
What about liquor?
Spirits cannot. Spirits are under the exclusive territory of the Department of Liquor and Lottery.
So sorry, say that one again. RTDs can be shipped direct to consumer,
Yes.
not to
Under this
retail.
proposal.
This
Correct.
proposal has RTDs being able to be shipped direct. So
So we're adding RTDs for direct shipping.
wow, but we're not doing,
And
Fortified wines.
fortified wines where they presently can't be shipped and will then continue not to be able to be.
Correct.
so
So this is
that's a
pretty big.
big move. particularly if we
I
get,
don't know.
also,
We probably don't have any manufacturers in the state of Vermont of ready to drink.
I think we have two. I think we have two out of 120 or 30 that do this. I think there are two. I mean, one of my questions is, what's the impact on Vermont product here? And that's a big question, I think, for all of this in terms of what stays on the shelf, what doesn't. But this is not a big Vermont. I know we heard from Matt that it's an area that some distillers are moving into, but it's at the moment not yet a big Vermont.
There are Vermont manufacturers that are canning and selling on
But
their own.
I think
premises
very
right
few.
now. And if you would like to hear from them, House Ways and Means does have a witness list for a day they took testimony on this, and I believe there were perhaps two.
But this is really nose on the tent in terms of direct to consumer shipping for distilled spirits. Right?
So
So we get,
all the
Yes.
wineries here and the craft breweries, they can already ship anywhere in the country they want.
Yes, there are some exceptions. There
Some
are
states-
states that require reciprocity and, we allow malt beverage shipping. So our producers should be able to ship to, for example, Oregon, which has a reciprocity requirement for direct consumer shipping.
So once again, the fortified wines are a little inconsistent. We're now moving them to the grocery store, but we're not allowing them to be shipped.
yeah, we have a lot of we have a lot
Do we
of,
have any manufacturers of fortified wines in the state of
we
Vermont?
do.
We do, and
Big,
again, important distinction with how these definitions are set up. If they're making a less than 16% alcohol by volume fortified wine, they can get a minus beverage shipping license because that beverage is considered a minus beverage under this scheme. If it's 16 to 23%, it's fortified wine and can't be shipped. And there is at least one manufacturer that has come in, I think each of the last 3 sessions, called Vermont Vermouth. And they produce vermouths that are under 16% and would be able to be shipped as a minus
So
beverage.
in this bill, we're allowing fortified wines under 23% to go to the grocery store to help the restaurants and bars, but we're not allowed the manufacturer to
Direct.
ship them out of state.
correct.
You want
I
to
think-
identify yourself briefly?
Yes, John McCann, North Branch Vineyards here in Montpelier, Vermont. I yet to make a fortified wine, but it is my future goal to make a fortified wine. And I would like to ship fortified wines. So I really strongly encourage you to include fortified wines as a direct to retail.
That would include the meads, right? What's,
Well, so mead again is a wine style.
right, but it's
fermentation.
considered a fortified wine.
No, because
Oh, it's not?
it's made out of honey. Yes,
Oh,
but they
Well,
could
it's same thing.
fortify it if they'd like to.
But fortified.
Just seems a little inconsistent.
So yes, I would love to have that change to be able to ship fortified.
Okay,
Next big picture chunk of this bill here that I want to flag for you. Sections 34 through 36, page 36 is where this starts. These are the tax changes.
okay.
And to explain what is happening, fortified wines and this ready-to-drink spirits beverage category are moving out of the 5% excise tax that is applied to those products when they are under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Department of Liquor and Lottery and are shifting over, and this is in section 34, 7 PSA, section 421, to the gallonage tax statute. And the way that this would work is that both the RTDs and the fortified wines would be subject to a 55-cent per gallon tax. This is the same tax that is applied to minus beverages and malt beverages that are over 6% alcohol by volume. There's a separate lower gallonage tax for malt beverages that have a lower ABV.
And
Spirits.
Joint fiscal has says this is a wash in terms of when they do all the numbers. The state will still, will not lose revenue.
There is a section, it was added to the end of the bill to ensure that it's a wash. And that will be the last piece that I'll highlight for you.
Ready for that now? No, wait.
Yeah, we can. So if we,
But just before we leave the taxation piece, spirits are taxed differently.
The excess tax, because they're still under the control of the state.
Right. And that would equate to what per gallon?
sorry, I was focused on the
The
page.
spirits tax is 5% on the gross revenue. It's not gallonage.
I know, but if it was, I mean, given that all the rest of it is by
Yeah.
gallon, malt and,
So we have to see the fiscal. model.
Yeah,
Right.
Graham did look at it, and I believe the way that it was described for the House General Committee by joint fiscal was that the gallonage tax of comparable value would be prohibitive. I
it's
believe
seven,
was-
over $7. I mean, it's quite a lot more. $7.50.
All right, so the last few things to highlight for you here, we're gonna be on page 44 through 45, two pieces. First, RTDs are added to the bottle redemption statute, but 4 to 5 lines are not. And again, that has to do with containers, the type of container used.
Well, all
Wine
these
beverages
cans.
are not included in the bottle redemption.
So
right now.
what's not?
4 to 5 lines, and again, that's because minus beverages as a category is not included in the bottle redemption statute.
But
TDs will
booze,
be,
but distilled, many distilled bottles have 15 cents on them.
that's because liquor is defined.
Not all of them. It's weird.
All right,
I didn't quite get this, so they are gonna be in the deposit system, 4 to 5 lines and RTDs?
just RTDs.
Because they're in cans, and so they'll be added at the moment to the bottle redemption.
I believe
And
that
what
was
section are we in? I'm totally.
section 43.
Oh, that's
on
right.
page 44.
So right now, ready to drink, go to the 2 stores, are they part of the bottle?
They have cans, I mean, so do they have 5 cents on them?
I actually don't know.
So we contract with the contractor to, if the empties, and that they're 15 cents. Every liquor container has a 15-cent deposit on it, right?
So does it work like the 5-cent one in soda cans, but it's just 15 cents? Is it on all your ready to drinks that go through your presently?
That is my understanding, is that it's 15 cents. I can clarify you, it's not on the smaller sizes. It's not on the little ones. Which we call nips, the little ones, not on those. 50 milliliter, 100 milliliter.
Whatever they're called. What are the ones that,
I don't know.
But I guess I'm confused as to why this is in there if it's already required, or is it not required? People are doing it anyhow.
I believe, and I'll look into this, that by including it within the section that those RTD cans would be subject to the 5 cent rather than the 15% bottle deposit.
Right, well, that makes sense. It's not-
If we do all this, if they end up,
Do all
right?
this, yes.
But even so, they should be. I mean, they're so small.
But they're being considered more like beer and wine. I think they should have the same kind of deposit law applied to them. Supposed to. Okay, let's get to that. So the last section is this guaranteed.
Yes, section 44A, which is on page 45, and this is the guarantee of transfers to the general fund. And if we get into the weeds now, it will take a long time, but to understand that there is a markup that DLL profits from. And by shifting these beverages out of DLL control, that markup, the DLL share, is going to go to the private market, and that may impact the direct app transfer from the department to the general fund in each fiscal year. So House Ways and Means, subsection A has a transfer for FY 2023. Subsection B has a transfer for FY 2024, which could be overridden in the next biennium, but at least for now, this sets the expectation of what the transfer is going to be in 2024. And then in subsection C, there is the expression of the General Assembly's intent that this transfer is going to increase and follow the rise of the alcohol and beverage sales in the state.
So this is sort of like a belts and suspenders. The Department of Liquor Control says it's going to be a wash in terms of revenue, but if it's not, you still got to pay us, find the money somewhere. Where are they going to find the money?
That is a very concise way to put it. And the last part of your question
Guaranteeing
is-
the revenue. Which,
Until they don't have it.
until they don't have it,
The
right?
commissioners will go out, start working with to raise the money. Okay.